Hi, it's Stefan in downtown Sofia, the capital of Bulgaria. Today I invite you on a virtual tour around one of the largest landmarks in Sofia and in Bulgaria, the Cathedral of St Alexander Nevsky or Alexander Nevsky. Actually, this is one of the most famous and notorious landmarks in the Bulgarian capital. But probably you'll be surprised to hear that it is relatively new. It was built for 8 years between 1904 and 1912. But it was not opened yet because Bulgaria was practically in a state of war. First it was the Balkan Wars, the two Balkan Wars, and then it was the First World War. So the building was consecrated and opened for liturgies and services in the 1920s. For years, it has been the largest Eastern Orthodox cathedral in the Balkan Peninsula, but not anymore. But it is important to know that the spiritual heart of Bulgaria and the Bulgarians is here. This is the Metropolitan Cathedral of Bulgaria. It has a special status. No private ceremonies are allowed to take place inside. So, no baptism, no funerals, no weddings. Of course, if we want to follow a rule, there should be exceptions from the rule. And most of those exceptions were related to the Bulgarian royal family, so royal weddings, funerals took place here. And a few years ago, the first democratically elected president of Bulgaria after the fall of communism, Dr. Zhelev, his funeral was inside this cathedral. Although the cathedral was built over an old Turkish cemetery, some of the most remarkable Russian and Bulgarian architects from the late 19th and early 20th century worked here, so that we would have a celebration of the Eastern Orthodox faith and everything that is Bulgarian. What you see is actually a church dedicated to a saint who is even not a Bulgarian, Alexander Nevsky. Actually, on the top, at the bell tower, you can see an image of this saint. This is actually a 2-meter high mosaic. Saint Alexander Nevsky was a Russian king who lived in 13th century and was famous for defeating the Teutonian Knights, for defeating Tatars, and also for his victories on the battlefield. Later, he became one of the saints of the Russian Church. Bulgaria was liberated from the Ottoman Empire with the help of the Russians in 1878. So this happened during the rule of the Russian Emperor Alexander II. His personal saint, his patron, was Alexander Nevsky, and this is the reason why our church, our largest church, was named after a Russian church, Saint Alexander Nevsky. Part of the exterior decoration of the church is mosaics. Mosaics that you can see all around. They have Bulgarian and Russian saints, but here, in this case, you see a couple of Bulgarian saints, Saint Nicholas the New and Saint George the New. Actually, these are Bulgarian martyrs who, defending the Eastern Orthodox faith during the Ottoman period, died. So this is the reason why they were beatificated and later became those symbols of resistance and fight for Eastern Orthodox faith and everything that is Bulgarian. And from this site is probably one of the most comprehensive views of St. Alexander Nevsky Cathedral. From here you can see some of the specifics of the architecture, which can easily define the architectural style. Actually, surprise, surprise, there's not a single architectural style. Actually, there are a combination of at least two architectural styles: the new Russian and the new Byzantine. Actually, when you look at the cathedral from this side, when you see the main dome and the plethora of domes and semi-domes around, probably you have one thought coming to your head, and that is the mother of all churches, Hagia Sophia in Istanbul. And you won't be quite away from what is truth, because this is a very specific trait of the new Byzantine architecture, church architecture, when we have one main dome surrounded by a number of semi or quarter domes. And this is how we have one very stable construction, which you can see here. But at the same time, you can see the bell tower of the church. Actually, in the classical Bulgarian tradition and also in the Byzantine tradition, we don't have a bell tower, which is a part of the main structure, especially when we're talking about the medieval period. When we see this bell tower, have in mind that there's something Russian involved. And definitely, this is one of the traits of the new Russian architecture here. Actually, in the medieval period, when we talk about church architecture, even if we have a separate bell tower, it won't be very typical. And as I said, it will be separate from the main construction, from the main structure. But in the Russian style, it will be a part of the structure. So this is a compromise, what you can see here, a compromise of the local characteristics of the Bulgarian traits that dominated the architecture in these lands, and the gratitude that we have for the Russians coming on our side to liberate us from the Ottoman Turks in the 1870s. That's why we have this type of architecture. And probably many of you would ask me, but what about this church during the communist period? What happened? You know that for the communist, religion was opium for the masses. In many other communist countries, churches were destroyed, blown up, turned into prisons and storages. But this was not the case with St Alexander Nevsky Cathedral. The church remained open. Of course, it was not easy to pray. It was not easy to attend services and masses, because the agents of the state security services will be all around, and if you are to be seen there will be not quite good consequences for you and for your family members and loved ones. But the church remained open during the communist period. Another important building very close to St Alexander Nevsky Cathedral is this beautiful and elegant structure from early 20th century. This is the building of the Holy Synod of the Bulgarian Orthodox Church. The Holy Synod is actually the council that governs the Bulgarian Eastern Orthodox Church. It consists of the metropolitans or the archbishops of Bulgaria, led by the Bulgarian Patriarch. The building itself is built in the best examples of national romantic style, where you can see the stripes, the red stripes, where you can see the small arches, all of those elements that you can see in the heyday of the Bulgarian medieval state and church between 12th and 14th century. right in front of the cathedral, there's a monument depicting one animal, a lion, the national symbol of Bulgaria and the Bulgarians. Actually, this lion is a symbol of Bulgarian bravery, of Bulgaria's might, and that's why it was placed here. So what's the story of the lion and the monument of the unknown soldier, which also defines the square in front of St Alexander Nevsky Cathedral? Right after the end of First World War, when Bulgarian dreams was shattered, as we took the losing side of the war, and the Bulgarians were not able to achieve their dream in living one free and independent country. It is the very same period where all around Europe special monuments are built. These are the cenotaphs, monuments dedicated to all those known and unknown heroes who died on the battlefields of the war. In Bulgaria it was the same case. One of our most famous sculptors, Andrei Nikolov, was invited to make such a monument. So, of course, he decided to make the lion. The lion, as I mentioned, was the national symbol of Bulgaria. But this lion was quite special. Look at him. Look at the face of the lion. He's a little bit sad. He's not happy. Look at his body. He's skinny. You can count the ribs of the lion. So naturally, some people were not happy with this monument, because for them the lion was symbol of might, and you cannot see any might here. And of course people started talking, offending the author, and the sculptor, as a man of art, was offended. This is the reason why we have only one lion. No other lion was cast. But at the same time, this lion, according to the words of the sculptor, is meant to represent the grief of the Bulgarians, the grief of the Bulgarian mothers for not being able to have our goals achieved, and for losing hundreds of thousands of lives on the battlefields. That's why we have this sad lion being part of our monument of the unknown soldier. Because in the end of the day, when we talk about wars, we cannot glorify them because lives are lost. The same case is here, and that's why we have our sad but proud lion part of the monument of unknown soldier. So the sculpture of the lion is part of the bigger complex of the monument of unknown soldier. It's a long story. It's an off and on story, because the lion was not always here. In the first years of communism, after bombings in Sofia, the lion was removed from this place, went outside of Sofia for almost 30 years, and later, the early 1980s, when the monument was restored in its previous glory, the lion was returned, and then we have the eternal flame here, reminding us about the souls of all those soldiers who died protecting the motherland. A significant part of the spiritual complex around St Alexander Nevsky Cathedral is the old church of St Sophia. Actually, this is one of the oldest churches in Sofia and Bulgaria. The structure behind me, the brickwork structure, was founded pretty much at the time of Hagia Sophia in Istanbul. It was the 6th century AD. So that was a church to glorify God and the wisdom of God. because Sophia from Greek language means the wisdom of God. One of the few churches that remained in Bulgarian lands and dedicated to the wisdom of God. But only this one is still serving as a church. But what was the story of this church? Let me take you and explain you more. St Sophia is one of the oldest churches in Sofia, as I mentioned, but it has a turbulent destiny as well as the modern Bulgarian capital. The church was used as a church till 14th century when the Ottoman Turks invaded these lands. During the Ottoman period, the church was converted into a mosque. A minaret was built and it served as a mosque till mid-1800s. Then there was a huge earthquake, the minaret of the mosque collapsed and the building was abandoned. Then the church was used as a storage. In late 19th century was already used even as a headquarters for the fire brigade of Sofia. Why? Because it was pretty much one of the largest structures here. So they even set a special base on the top of the church, and the base there was used as an observation deck to look for city fires all around the city. Extensive archaeology works took place here, and inside the church, underneath the floor, there are more than 160 tombs and graves, which could be dated between 2nd and 4th century AD. But what is really special about this church is the fact that the church gave the name of the Bulgarian capital, Sofia. From 14th century on, we have the very first record, which is an evidence that here, the modern Bulgarian capital, was already the city of the holy wisdom, Sofia. Today the basilica of St Sophia is very popular among Bulgarians, especially if you want to baptize your children or have your wedding. This is the place, because what a better place for doing that than a 14th century old church, St Sophia Church, right behind me. Remember I told you that the Church of St Sophia was built on the top of a cemetery. It was the so-called Eastern necropolis of the Roman city of Serdica, practically the predecessor of the Bulgarian capital. So below me, under the glass, you can see a couple of those tombs. This is actually one of the type of the tombs, the so-called semi-cylindrical one, so you can clearly see that it was built of bricks, and on the top of it, it was used plaster to seal it. Why would it was needed that? Practically because half of this tomb was above the ground. So if you needed protection from the weather, if you needed protection from rain, that was the way. Use the plaster on the top of the bricks and voila, you have them preserved even nowadays. The walls of St Sophia Cathedral keep the secrets of the present-day Bulgarian capital. Actually, these are walls where different building materials, bricks, river stones, Roman cement could be seen. Moments where new windows were added, or older windows were getting smaller. This is the so-called cell-type masonry that is used when we have a stone in the middle surrounded by bricks, both horizontally and vertically. Actually, this is part of the numerous reconstructions of the church. What you see today as a structure here is actually the newest church. Probably you'll be surprised to hear that there are 3 other churches on this very spot. These churches were from the period of 4th and 5th century AD, and what is here today is from 6th century. So a lot of history combined on one space only. And another important monument in front of Alexander Nevsky Cathedral, and at the same time at the back of St Sophia basilica, is related to a moment of our new history, of our modern history. And this is from the time when the Bulgarian people, Bulgarian church, and the Bulgarian royal family saved their Jewish people from the Holocaust. So this is the monument. This is actually a replica of the original slabs that are part of Yad Vashem Memorial Complex in the state of Israel. They commemorate the lives of 49,000 Bulgarian Jewish people who were saved during World War II. So here, in 3 languages, in Hebrew, in English, and in Bulgarian, it is the gratitude expressed to what happened those days. Of course, it's a very touching and long story, and I promise you that I will give you a special tour on that.